My name is Colleen, 32 years old, and as I stood outside the ballroom adjusting my simple black dress from Target, my hands trembled slightly. Tonight was my brother Marcus's engagement party, and I knew exactly what awaited me behind those ornate doors. The same condescending looks, the whispered comments about the family failure, the barely concealed disdain from his fiancée's wealthy family. Yet here I was, clutching the invitation that arrived so late, I almost wondered if they'd forgotten about me entirely. Or maybe they hoped I wouldn't come. Before I continue this story, I want to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever been underestimated or judged by your appearance, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you want to hear how one evening changed everything. Because what happened next at that engagement party left an entire room of successful executives speechless. Trust me, you'll want to hear how the tables turned. Growing up, Marcus and I were inseparable. I was 4 years older, and from the moment he came home from the hospital, tiny and crying, I appointed myself his protector. Our childhood in a cramped two-bedroom apartment in Queens wasn't easy. Dad left when Marcus was 3, leaving Mom to work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. I remember watching her come home at 2 in the morning, feet swollen from standing all day at the diner, then heading out again at 6 for her morning shift at the grocery store. When Marcus started elementary school, he was small for his age. Quiet wore hand-me-down clothes that never quite fit right. The other kids were cruel, calling him names, shoving him into lockers. I walked him to school every morning and picked him up every afternoon, making sure those bullies knew they'd answer to me if they touched my brother. More than once, I came home with scraped knuckles and detention slips, but Marcus came home safe. By the time I reached senior year of high school, I'd already been accepted to Columbia University with a partial scholarship. Mom cried when the letter came, said it was everything she'd dreamed of for me. But then Marcus got sick that same year, really sick with a kidney infection that landed him in the hospital for 3 weeks. The medical bills piled up faster than Mom could work to pay them. I made a decision that I never told Marcus about until years later. I deferred my admission, then eventually let it go entirely. Instead, I took a job at a tech startup doing data entry during the day and waited tables at night. Every extra dollar went either to Mom for bills or into a savings account I'd opened for Marcus's education. I told him I was taking a gap year to figure out what I really wanted. He believed me because he was 14 and trusted everything I said. When Marcus graduated high school as valedictorian, I was the loudest one cheering in that auditorium. He'd gotten into MIT full scholarship for academics, and I knew every late night he'd studied, every advanced placement test he'd aced, was his ticket out of the struggle we'd grown up in. I drove him to Cambridge myself in my beat-up Honda Civic, helped him set up his dorm room, and told him to focus on his studies, not to worry about anything back home. Those 4 years he was at MIT were some of the hardest and yet most rewarding of my life. I'd moved into an even smaller studio apartment eating ramen most nights, but I'd also started learning everything I could about business and investing. The startup I worked for was growing, and I paid attention to every meeting I could listen in on, every strategy session I could observe. When the founder asked if anyone had ideas for improving our data processing system, I stayed up 3 nights straight creating a presentation. That presentation saved the company $2 million a year and earned me a promotion to operations manager. Marcus graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer engineering. The day Sterling Industries offered him a position as a junior developer with a 6-figure starting salary, he called me crying with joy. Sterling Industries was one of the biggest tech firms in New York, known for their innovative projects and prestigious clientele. It was everything we dreamed of when we were kids, sharing a bedroom whispering about the future in the dark. That's where he met Harper Whitman. Harper was everything we weren't growing up. Her father Richard was executive vice president of Sterling Industries. Her mother Margaret came from old money, the kind that had streets named after them in the Hamptons. Harper worked in marketing, though. From what I gathered, her position was more about maintaining family legacy than actual merit. She was beautiful in that polished way that money buys, all sharp cheekbones and designer clothes, and perfectly highlighted hair that probably cost more than my monthly rent. At first, Marcus was just excited to be dating someone so sophisticated. He'd bring Harper to our monthly dinner dates at small diners or family-owned restaurants, and she'd pick at her food while making comments about the decor or the service. I watched my brother start to change slowly at first. He stopped wearing his favorite comic book t-shirts, traded them for polo shirts, and pressed khakis. He started using words like summer as a verb and mentioning vineyard tours and charity galas. The monthly dinners became every other month, then quarterly, then stopped altogether. When I'd text him, the responses came slower, shorter. When I called, he was always busy with Harper's family or work events I apparently wouldn't enjoy. The last time I'd seen him 6 months ago, I'd surprised him at his office for his birthday with homemade cookies. Our grandmother's recipe he used to beg me to make. He'd looked embarrassed when his colleagues saw me in my jeans and old college sweatshirt, quickly ushered me out, saying he had an important meeting. But Marcus was still my baby brother. So when the invitation to his engagement party arrived, even though it came just a week before the event, obviously an afterthought or maybe Harper's mother's insistence on proper etiquette, I decided to go. I told myself it was to be supportive, to show him I was happy for his success. But really, I needed to see for myself that he was okay, that beneath all the designer clothes and new vocabulary, my brother was still in there somewhere. The truth was, there was so much Marcus didn't know about my life now. So much I'd kept hidden, not out of shame, but out of necessity. He didn't know about the nights I'd spent teaching myself coding after he'd gone to MIT, using free online resources and library computers. He didn't know about the app I developed that helped small businesses manage inventory, or how I'd sold it to a major retailer for $50 million. He didn't know about Phoenix Capital, the investment firm I'd founded with that money, or the 12 companies we'd acquired and turned profitable in the last 5 years. I'd kept it all secret because I wanted Marcus to build his own success, to never feel like he was living in my shadow, or that his achievements were somehow less because his sister had made it first. I'd watched too many families torn apart by money and comparison. I wanted him to stand on his own merit, make his own choices, even if those choices led him to people like Harper Whitman. Standing in my apartment that evening, looking at the invitation's gold embossed letters announcing the engagement party at the Ritz-Carlton, I made a decision. I'd go not as C.A. Montgomery, CEO of Phoenix Capital, but as Colleen, the sister who'd raised him, who'd sacrificed everything for his future. I'd wear something simple, blend into the background, watch him be happy. That was the plan anyway. How wrong I was about how the evening would unfold. The Ritz-Carlton's valet looked at my 10-year-old Honda Civic with barely concealed surprise, but professionally took my keys and handed me a claim ticket. I smoothed down my black dress one more time as I walked through the lobby. $40 at Target on sale. But it fit well and was clean and pressed. I'd even bought new flats for $20, though they were already pinching my feet slightly. The ballroom was on the 3rd floor, and I could hear the party before the elevator doors even opened. Laughter, the clink of champagne glasses, a string quartet playing something classical I probably should have recognized but didn't. I followed the sound down a hallway lined with mirrors that reflected my simple appearance back at me multiple times, each reflection a reminder of how out of place I was about to be. A woman at the entrance, clipboard in hand, looked me up and down before asking for my name. When I said it, she frowned, checked her list twice, then seemed surprised to find it there at all. She gestured vaguely toward the room without offering to announce me or show me to a table like she had for the couple before me. The ballroom was spectacular in that overwhelming way that screamed money. Crystal chandeliers threw light across gold-accented walls, round tables draped in white silk held centerpieces that must have cost more than most people's monthly salary. And the people, at least 100 of them, all looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. Men in designer suits that fit like they were born in them, women in cocktail dresses that probably had names attached to them, jewelry that caught the light with every gesture. I spotted Marcus almost immediately. He was near the front of the room, Harper attached to his arm like an expensive accessory. He looked good, I had to admit. The awkward boy who used to trip over his own feet had grown into his height, filled out his frame. His suit was perfectly tailored, his hair styled in a way that looked effortless, but probably wasn't. He was laughing at something Harper's father was saying, but I knew my brother well enough to recognize the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Harper saw me first. Her gaze swept the room the way someone surveys their domain, and when it landed on me, her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. She leaned into Marcus, whispered something that made him turn. For just a moment when our eyes met, I saw the flicker of my baby brother. Then it was gone, replaced by something that looked like panic mixed with embarrassment. He didn't come over, didn't wave, just turned back to his conversation, while Harper continued to stare at me with what could only be described as amused disdain. I found a spot near the back wall, declining the champagne a server offered. I needed to stay sharp, though, for what I wasn't sure yet. An older woman dripping in pearls and judgment approached me. Margaret Whitman Harper's mother, though we'd never been formally introduced. She looked me over the way someone might examine a stain on an expensive carpet with distaste and a plan for removal. "You must be Marcus's sister," she said, making sister sound like a communicable disease. "How nice that you could make it. Harper wasn't sure you'd received your invitation in time." The lie was so smooth I almost admired it. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, keeping my voice pleasant and neutral. "And what is it you do again?" Marcus mentioned something about customer service. The question was designed to humiliate, delivered loud enough for others nearby to hear. "Something like that?" I said, simply not taking the bait. She waited for me to elaborate, to scramble to justify my existence in her presence, but I just smiled and remained silent. It threw her off balance for a moment before she recovered. "Well, there's food at the back tables if you're hungry. I'm sure it's quite a treat for you." She drifted away, leaving ice in her wake. Over the next hour, I became a curiosity. People would walk by pretending to go to the bar or restroom just to get a look at Marcus's sister. I heard the whispers, not even particularly quiet ones. "Can you believe they're related? She seems nice enough, just so plain." Marcus must be mortified. I heard she never even finished college. Then a group of Marcus's colleagues from Sterling Industries had gathered at the table next to where I stood. They were all in their late 20s or early 30s, drunk on their own success and premium vodka. One of them, Brad, according to his loud self-introduction to every woman who walked by, was holding court. "The funniest thing," Brad was saying, gesturing with his whiskey, "is that Marcus tried to get her a job at Sterling last year. Can you imagine? Came to me directly, since I run the junior development team, asked if we had any openings in admin or maybe the cafeteria. I had to tell him we have standards even for family favors." The group laughed, and I watched Marcus across the room, saw his jaw tighten. He'd heard it too. But he didn't come to my defense, didn't correct the lie. Because it was a lie. Marcus had never asked anyone for a job for me. That would have required him to admit I existed to his new world. Harper chose that moment to appear at my elbow, her perfume preceding her like an expensive warning. "Colleen, so glad you could come," she said, her voice honeyed poison. "I was just telling Daddy how brave you are showing up here all alone. Most people would feel too out of place, but not you." "I came to celebrate my brother's engagement," I said evenly. "Of course you did. Family is so important, isn't it? Even when they're from such different worlds. Marcus is lucky I'm so understanding about his background. Not everyone in my circle would be so accepting of his humble beginnings." The threat was clear. Marcus was allowed in their world on Harper's terms, and those terms could be revoked. I was a liability to his new life, an embarrassing reminder of where he came from. "Marcus earned everything he has," I said quietly. Harper laughed, a tinkling sound that drew attention. "Did he, though? I mean, Sterling Industries is very selective. If Daddy hadn't seen potential in him, hadn't personally recommended him for the position, who knows where he'd be." Another lie. Marcus had gotten into Sterling Industries on his own merit, his MIT credentials and coding skills speaking for themselves. But I was starting to understand the web Harper and her family had woven around my brother, the narrative they'd created, where his success was their gift to him. Richard Whitman's voice suddenly boomed across the room, calling for attention. The string quartet stopped, conversations died, and all eyes turned to the front where he stood with a champagne glass raised. "Friends, colleagues, family," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being listened to. "We're here tonight to celebrate the engagement of my beautiful daughter Harper to Marcus Chen." I noticed the small flinch from Marcus at the use of Chen. Our last name was Chen, but Marcus had been going by Marcus Whitman at work, I realized. Taking Harper's name before they were even married, erasing our father's name, our history. "Sterling Industries has been my life for 25 years, Richard continued. "And in that time, I've built the mergers and acquisitions department from nothing into the powerhouse it is today. We've just completed our biggest quarter ever, acquiring 6 smaller firms and increasing our market share by 30%. The room applauded, and Richard basked in it before continuing. But tonight isn't about business, it's about family, about welcoming Marcus into ours. He paused his gaze, finding me in the crowd. And speaking of family, I believe Marcus's sister is here tonight. Colleen was it. Why don't you come up here so we can all meet you properly? The room turned to stare at me, 100 pairs of eyes following my walk to the front. Each step felt like walking through quicksand, the cheap flats clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that seemed to echo my out-of-place presence. Harper's smile was triumphant, Richard's was condescending, and Marcus looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. When I reached them, Richard threw an arm around my shoulders, the gesture looking friendly but feeling like a trap. The weight of his hand was possessive, controlling, steering me to face the crowd like a specimen on display. Everyone, this is Colleen, Marcus's older sister, he announced, managing to make older sound like ancient. Colleen, why don't you tell everyone a bit about yourself? I'm sure everyone's curious about Marcus's family. The microphone appeared in my hand before I could refuse it. The room waited, anticipation thick in the air. Some faces showed genuine curiosity, others barely concealed amusement, and a few, like Brad's, were openly mocking. I caught Marcus's eye, hoping to see some sign of support, some indication he wanted me to lie, or tell the truth, or just run. But he was staring at his shoes, his face flushed with what I recognized as shame. I work in business consulting, I said simply, hearing my voice echo through the speakers. Business consulting, Harper repeated, taking the microphone from me with a patronizing pat on my hand. Isn't that sweet? Colleen helps small businesses with their little problems, mom and pop shops, that sort of thing. It's so important to give back to the community, isn't it? The way she said it made it sound like I was a volunteer at a soup kitchen, not running a multi-billion-dollar firm. But I let her have her moment, watching as she preened in front of her audience. Brad's voice carried from his table, intentionally loud. Business consulting? That's what they're calling retail work these days. His group erupted in laughter. Now, Richard said, though his smile suggested he found it amusing too. Not everyone can work at Sterling Industries. We only hire the best and brightest. Top-tier education, proven track records, the right connections. Standards have to be maintained after all. Absolutely, Margaret Whitman chimed in, appearing beside her husband. Sterling Industries has a reputation to uphold. We can't just hire anyone off the street, family or not. I'm sure Colleen understands that her little consulting work is valuable in its own small way. The condescension was suffocating. I stood there surrounded by people who worked at a company I could buy with my pocket change, listening to them explain standards to me. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. Tell me, Colleen, Richard continued, clearly enjoying himself. What exactly does your consulting involve? Do you help with inventory, customer service training? I imagine it must be challenging work for someone without formal business education. The crowd was eating this up, their entertainment for the evening, apparently being the humiliation of Marcus's poor, uneducated sister. I saw a few people pulling out phones, probably texting others about the spectacle or maybe even recording it. I help companies reach their potential, I said carefully. Brad stood up from his table, whiskey courage making him bold. Potential. That's rich. Hey, Marcus, maybe your sister can help me reach my potential. I've been thinking about getting my car detailed. That counts as consulting, right? The laughter that followed was cruel, the kind that's meant to wound. I watched Marcus's hands clench into fists at his sides, but still he said nothing. Harper had her hand on his arm, her nails digging in slightly, a silent warning to stay quiet. I actually have a great idea, Harper announced, her voice bright with false enthusiasm. Since Colleen is so good at helping small businesses, maybe she could give us some advice about the catering tonight. I mean, this is probably the fanciest event she's ever attended. What do you think, Colleen? Any consulting wisdom about the appetizer selection? Margaret laughed, that practiced society laugh that others immediately mimicked. Oh, Harper, you're terrible. But really, Colleen, you must be overwhelmed by all this. Marcus told us you grew up quite poor. This must be like entering another world entirely. 2 different worlds, Richard agreed. But that's what makes America great, isn't it? Even someone from Colleen's background can attend a party like this, rub shoulders with successful people. Of course, attending and belonging are two different things entirely. The phone in my pocket vibrated, then vibrated again, and again. I ignored it, but it kept going insistent in a way that meant something significant was happening. The fourth buzz was followed by a ringtone I'd specifically set for urgent calls loud enough that several people heard it. "I'm so sorry," I said, pulling out my phone. "I need to take this." "Of course she does," Harper stage whispered. "Probably her shift manager wondering why she's not at work." I looked at the screen. James Morrison, my CFO. 3 missed calls and a text that just said, "Urgent Sterling acquisition complete. Need your approval for press release." I could have stepped away, taken the call privately. Should have, probably. But standing there watching my brother stare at the floor while his future in-laws and colleagues tore me apart for their entertainment, something in me snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. Marcus needed to know who I really was. More importantly, he needed to see who these people really were. I answered the phone on speaker. "James," I said clearly, "you're on speaker. I'm at an event." "Ms. Montgomery." James's voice filled the suddenly quiet ballroom formal and urgent. "I apologize for the interruption, but the Sterling Industries acquisition just cleared final regulatory approval. We now officially own 67% of voting shares. The press release is ready for your approval, and the board is waiting for your directive on the restructuring timeline." The silence that followed was absolute. Richard Whitman's face had gone from red to white so fast, I wondered if he might faint. Harper's mouth was open, her perfect lipstick forming a small O of shock. Brad had dropped his whiskey, the glass shattering on the marble floor. "Sterling Industries," Margaret whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're buying Sterling Industries." I kept my voice professional, though I was looking directly at Richard. "Phoenix Capital has been acquiring shares for 18 months. The final block purchase from the Hastings Foundation gave us controlling interest." "Phoenix Capital," Richard repeated, his voice strangled. "C.A. Montgomery. You're C.A. Montgomery." "Colleen Alexandra Montgomery," I confirmed. The C.A. was more gender neutral for business dealings. People tend to take male CEOs more seriously, as I'm sure you understand. "James," I continued into the phone, which was still on speaker for the entire ballroom to hear, "tell the board we'll move forward with the restructuring as planned. The underperforming departments will be dissolved, starting with mergers and acquisitions. Richard Whitman's division, I believe." "That's correct, ma'am. Our analysis shows his department has been hemorrhaging money for 3 years, hidden by creative accounting. We'll be referring that to legal for investigation." Richard stumbled backward, Margaret catching his arm. The color had completely drained from his face as the implications hit him. Not just job loss, but potential criminal investigation for financial fraud. "Also," James continued, unaware of or uncaring about the drama unfolding, "the personnel audit flagged several employees for immediate termination based on hostile workplace behavior and ethics violations. A Brad Patterson is at the top of that list. Multiple HR complaints that were buried, apparently due to his connection to the Whitman family." Brad's knees actually buckled. He sat down hard in his chair, staring at me like I'd just materialized from thin air. "We'll handle that on Monday," I said. "What else?" "The tech innovation team has submitted their recommendations for promotions. Marcus Chen is being considered for Chief Technology Officer pending your approval. His work has been exceptional, though it seems he's been held back by management politics." I looked at Marcus then. Really, looked at him. My baby brother standing there in his expensive suit, surrounded by people who'd made him feel like he needed to erase himself to succeed. Tears were streaming down his face. "We'll discuss that later," I said to James. "Send me the full report tonight." "Yes, ma'am. Oh, and the Journal wants a statement about the acquisition by morning. They're particularly interested in your rise from, and I quote, 'humble beginnings to becoming one of the most powerful women in tech investing.'" "I'll handle it. Thank you, James." I ended the call and put my phone back in my pocket. The ballroom remained frozen like someone had hit pause on a movie. Then Harper found her voice shrill and desperate. "This has to be a joke, some kind of prank. You're nobody. You're nothing. You can't own Sterling Industries. Tell them, Marcus. Tell them about your pathetic sister who couldn't even finish college." Marcus finally looked up, and his voice when it came was broken. "Colleen graduated summa cum laude from Columbia. She finished her degree online while working 3 jobs to pay for my education. I found the diploma in her closet years ago, hidden behind old photo albums. The revelation hung in the air. I hadn't known Marcus knew about that. But you said, Harper sputtered, turning on Marcus, you told me she was a failure, that she was jealous of your success. I lied, Marcus said quietly. Or maybe I convinced myself it was true because it was easier than admitting I was ashamed of where I came from. Easier than standing up to you and your family when you mocked my background. This is ridiculous. Richard attempted to regain control. Even if you are C.A. Montgomery, you can't just waltz in here and destroy people's careers. I'll sue. I'll fight this. I pulled out my phone again, this time opening a file James had sent earlier. You could try, but this is interesting. Internal emails from your department discussing how to hide losses through subsidiary shuffling. And here's one where you explicitly tell your team to destroy evidence of the Patterson settlement. The one where Brad harassed an intern. The one you paid off with company funds allocated for R&D. Richard's lawyers, two of whom were at the party, immediately stepped away from him, their faces masks of professional distancing. You've been watching us, Margaret said, her voice hollow. This whole time you knew who we were, what we were doing. I've been watching Sterling Industries for 2 years, I corrected. When Marcus first started dating Harper, I did my research. I wanted to know who my brother was involved with. Imagine my surprise when I discovered the company he worked for was corrupt at the highest levels, and that corruption was centered in his girlfriend's family. You targeted us because of Marcus. Harper's voice was climbing toward hysteria. I targeted Sterling Industries because it was a good investment being ruined by bad management. The fact that it would also free my brother from your family's influence was a bonus. The room erupted then. People pulling out phones, making calls, some trying to leave discreetly. Several Sterling Industries employees were openly panicking, wondering if their jobs were safe. Others were approaching me, suddenly interested in the woman they'd been mocking minutes before. But I only had eyes for Marcus, who was walking toward me through the chaos, Harper calling after him, demanding he come back. Marcus stopped just in front of me, his face a mess of emotions I couldn't quite read. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the chaos of the ballroom fading into background noise. Then he collapsed into my arms, sobbing like he used to when he was little, and the world felt too big and cruel. I'm so sorry, Colleen, he choked out between sobs. I'm so sorry. I became everything we promised we'd never be. I became like the kids who bullied me, looking down on people for not having money. I held him tight, feeling him shake against me. My little brother, who I'd protected from playground bullies and helped with homework and sacrificed everything for finally coming back to me. I knew, he continued, pulling back to look at me with red-rimmed eyes. I knew you were successful. Maybe not this successful, but I knew you weren't struggling. I saw the apartment building records when I helped you move that one time. You owned the whole building, not just your unit. But I was so deep in their world by then I couldn't admit it. If you were successful without their approval, what did that mean about all the compromises I'd made? Harper appeared beside us, her perfect composure finally cracking. Marcus, you're being emotional. Let's go somewhere private and discuss this rationally. There's nothing to discuss, Marcus said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. We're done, Harper. You don't mean that. Her voice was desperate now. We have a wedding planned, vendors paid for, my parents' friends are all invited. You can't just walk away. Watch me, Marcus said simply. Harper turned to me, her eyes blazing with a hatred that was almost impressive in its intensity. You did this. You destroyed my family to get your brother back. You're a monster. I revealed who your family really was, I corrected. If that destroyed them, that's on them, not me. Richard had recovered enough to approach, though he kept a careful distance. Ms. Montgomery, perhaps we can come to some arrangement. Surely there's no need for criminal investigations. We're reasonable people. Reasonable people don't mock someone for their background while stealing from their own company, I said flatly. Reasonable people don't create hostile work environments and then cover them up. Your definition of reasonable and mine are very different. Brad, who had been trying to edge toward the exit, suddenly turned back, alcohol and desperation making him bold. You can't fire me without cause. I have a contract. I'll sue for wrongful termination. The 16 women who filed complaints against you that Richard buried would disagree about the without cause part, I said. But feel free to sue. I'm sure the discovery process will be fascinating. He went pale again and resumed his retreat toward the door. Margaret Whitman drew herself up to her full height, trying to salvage some dignity. You may have won this round, but we have connections you can't even imagine. We'll destroy your reputation. No one in society will associate with you. I don't want to associate with your society, I said simply. I've seen what it does to people. It made my brother ashamed of who he was, where he came from. It made him think he needed your approval to be worthy. That's not society. That's a cult. The crowd was thinning now, people fleeing what they sensed was a sinking ship. But a few remained, including some Sterling Industries employees who looked relieved rather than panicked. One woman who I recognized from my research as a brilliant programmer who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times in favor of less qualified men with connections actually gave me a small smile and nod. Harper made one last attempt, grabbing Marcus's arm. If you leave with her, you're done at Sterling Industries. I'll make sure of it. Marcus actually laughed, though it was bitter. Haven't you been listening? Your father won't be at Sterling Industries come Monday. Neither will Brad or any of the other cronies who made that place toxic. For the first time since I started there, I might actually be able to do my job without politics. But you won't, Harper said viciously, because you're nothing without us. Everything you have is because of my family. The job, the connections, the respect. Without us, you're just another poor kid from Queens with a degree. No, I said, stepping forward. He's a brilliant programmer who graduated top of his class from MIT. He's an innovative thinker who's had 12 patents filed in his name that your father took credit for. He's a kind, genuine person who let your family convince him those qualities were weaknesses. And he's my brother, which means he's under my protection. Always has been, even when he didn't know it. Harper's face contorted with rage. Protection! You've been lying to him for years, hiding who you really were. How is that different from what we did? Because I wanted him to succeed on his own merits, not ride my coattails. You wanted him to succeed only if he erased himself and became what you wanted him to be. That's the difference. Marcus straightened up, wiping his face. Harper, we're done. The engagement is off. I'll have your things sent to your parents' house. You'll regret this, she snarled. Both of you. When the high of this little victory wears off, you'll realize what you've lost. The connections, the status, the life you could have had. The only thing I lost, Marcus said quietly, was myself, and Colleen just helped me find him again. Harper stormed off her heels, clicking against the marble like gunshots. Her parents followed Richard, already on his phone, presumably with his lawyer Margaret clutching her pearls, like they might protect her from the social apocalypse heading their way. The ballroom was nearly empty now, just a few staff cleaning up, and some Sterling Industries employees who seemed to be waiting to talk to me. I'd deal with them later. Right now, all that mattered was Marcus. How long? He asked quietly. How long have you been C.A. Montgomery? 5 years officially. 7 if you count when I started the company under a different structure. And you never told me. Would it have changed anything? You were already pulling away by then, already embarrassed by me. If you'd known I had money, would you have come back because you loved me? Or because I was suddenly worthy in your new world's eyes? He flinched at the truth of it. I don't know. And that's horrible, isn't it? That I don't know. It's honest, I said, and that's more than we've had in years. We walked out of the ballroom together, leaving the wreckage of his engagement party behind. In the elevator, Marcus was quiet, processing everything that had happened. As we reached the lobby, he suddenly asked, "That CFO who called, James Morrison. He used to be at Goldman Sachs, right? I read about him in the Financial Times. They called him a genius strategist." "He is," I confirmed. "And he works for you, calls you ma'am, takes your orders. He's also a friend. We built Phoenix Capital together, though I have majority ownership." Marcus shook his head in wonder. How did I not see it? How did I not know my own sister was this powerhouse? Because you weren't looking, I said gently. You were too busy trying to become someone else to see who I was becoming. We reached my Honda Civic, the valet looking confused that the woman who just revealed herself as one of the most powerful people in tech was driving a 10-year-old car. "You still have this," Marcus asked, running his hand along the hood. It still runs. Why would I get rid of it? Because you could buy any car you want. Multiple cars. A fleet of cars. But this one has history. This is the car I drove you to MIT in. The car I slept in sometimes between my day job and night job. The car that reminded me where I came from and why I was working so hard. Some things aren't about money, Marcus. He started crying again. I forgot that. I forgot all of it. Harper and her family, they made me believe that everything before them was something to be ashamed of. Our apartment in Queens, Mom working 3 jobs you sacrifice in college for me. They called it baggage to overcome instead of the foundation that made us strong. You can remember now, I said. It's not too late. But what about my job, Sterling Industries? I can't work for my sister. That's nepotism. Everything Harper said people would think. First of all, you were already working under nepotism. Richard made sure you never advanced because he wanted you dependent on them. Second, I won't be running Sterling Industries directly. I'm bringing in new management people who will evaluate everyone based on merit. If you keep your job, it'll be because you deserve it. If you get promoted, it'll be because you've earned it. I won't interfere either way. You do that. Stay hands off. Marcus, I just spent 7 years building an empire while staying invisible to you. I think I can manage being hands off at one company. We got in the car and I started driving. Not toward his apartment in the financial district or mine on the Upper East Side, but toward Queens, toward the old neighborhood. Where are we going? He asked. Chen's Dumplings is still open until midnight. I checked last week. Thought we might get some soup dumplings and remember who we really are. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. Mr. Chen still makes them himself. Every batch. His son tried to convince him to retire, but he says retirement is for people who don't love what they do. Like you love what you do, building companies, taking down corrupt executives. I love giving good people the chance to succeed without having to compromise who they are. Phoenix Capital has helped 43 companies restructure, not just making them profitable, but making them better places to work. Places where someone like you, brilliant, but from the wrong background, can succeed without having to pretend to be someone else. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights blurring past. Finally, Marcus asked, "What happens Monday with Sterling Industries?" Richard is out, obviously. Legal will handle the fraud investigation. Brad and 6 others will be terminated for cause. The entire M&A department will be dissolved and rebuilt. The good employees, the ones who've been held back by politics and favoritism, will finally get their chances. And you'll go to work and do what you do best. Create brilliant code without having to worry about Harper or her family or any of that toxic culture. And Harper? What happens to her? Nothing. She wasn't involved in the fraud as far as we can tell. If she can do her job without her father's protection, she keeps it. If not, she'll be let go like any other underperforming employee. I'm not vindictive, Marcus. I'm just practical. She'll never forgive you. Or me. I can live with that. Can you? He thought about it as we pulled up to Chen's Dumplings, the neon sign flickering just like it had when we were kids. Yeah, I can. For the first time in years, I can live with myself. Inside Chen's Dumplings, Mr. Chen himself greeted us with surprise and delight. He remembered us, the 2 kids who used to come in with carefully counted quarters, splitting 1 order of dumplings between us because that's all we could afford. Now he insisted on bringing us dish after dish, refusing payment, saying seeing us grown and successful was payment enough. Marcus told me everything as we ate, how the manipulation had started small, Harper suggesting he dress differently for company events, her mother commenting on his accent, offering to pay for speech coaching to help him sound more professional, her father taking credit for his ideas at work while telling him it was for his own good, that no one would take a junior developer seriously anyway. It was like being slowly boiled, he said, using his chopsticks to pick up another dumpling. Each thing seemed reasonable on its own. Of course I should dress appropriately for executive dinners. Of course I should work on my presentation skills. But somewhere along the way, I lost track of where improvement ended and erasure began. When did you start going by Whitman at work? I asked. 6 months ago. Richard suggested it, said it would help me fit in better with clients. Said Chen sounded too foreign, might make people uncomfortable. I told myself it was just for work, but then Harper started introducing me as Marcus Whitman at social events too. Pretty soon, Chen only existed when I was alone, and even then, I started forgetting who that person was. Mr. Chen brought us tea, the same jasmine blend he'd served for 30 years. As he poured, he said something in Mandarin to Marcus, who looked surprised. "You speak Mandarin now?" I asked. Harper thought it would be useful for business. Funny, right? Erase my Chinese name, but learn the language for profit. He turned to Mr. Chen and responded in Mandarin, then translated for me. He said our mother would be proud, that we've succeeded without losing our hearts. "Mom," I said softly. We hadn't talked about her yet. She'd died 3 years ago, cancer taking her before either of us had achieved what we'd promised her we would. Marcus had been dating Harper by then, and she'd convinced him that a small private funeral was more appropriate than the big celebration of life Mom would have wanted. I couldn't even grieve properly, Marcus admitted. Harper said excessive mourning was unprofessional, that I needed to show strength at work. I took 2 days off. 2 days for the woman who sacrificed everything for us. "I know," I said. "I was there. You left right after the service. Harper said you had an important meeting." I didn't. We went to her parents' house for dinner. They served lobster and talked about vacation homes while our mother's ashes were still warm. His voice broke. How did I become that person, Colleen? How did I dishonor her memory like that? "You got lost. It happens. But you're finding your way back. That's what matters." We talked until Chen's closed, Mr. Chen finally shooing us out with leftovers packed in containers that could feed us for a week. Standing on the sidewalk where we'd played as kids, where I'd taught Marcus to ride a bike and defended him from bullies, we both seemed to realize how far we'd traveled just to end up back where we started. "I want to leave Sterling Industries," Marcus said suddenly. "You don't have to with new management." "No, I need to. Even with Richard gone, even with new leadership, it'll always be the place where I lost myself. I need a fresh start." "What will you do?" "I've had an idea for a startup, educational software that adapts to how kids actually learn, not how we think they should learn. Something that could help kids like we were, who are brilliant but don't fit the traditional mold." "That's a good idea." "Would Phoenix Capital be interested in investing?" I smiled. "Phoenix Capital doesn't invest in ideas. We invest in people. But Colleen Chen might personally invest in her brother if he's serious about it." "Chen," Marcus repeated. "I want to be Marcus Chen again. No more Whitman, no more pretending, just me." "Just you is pretty great," I said, pulling him into a hug. A year has passed since that night at the engagement party. Marcus's startup, Chen Educational Technologies, just closed its Series A funding with 3 major investors, though I kept my investment personal and anonymous. He's dating a programmer named Amy, who grew up in Brooklyn and thinks designer labels are ridiculous. She makes him laugh real laughter, not the polite society chuckle he'd perfected with Harper. Sterling Industries is thriving under new management. The woman I'd noticed at the party, the brilliant programmer who'd been overlooked, is now Chief Technology Officer. She's hired 16 new developers, all chosen for talent rather than connections. Richard Whitman is under federal investigation for fraud. Brad Patterson lost his license to work in tech after the full extent of his harassment came to light. Harper still works there in a reduced capacity, having to actually prove her worth for the first time in her life. I still drive my Honda Civic, though I did get it detailed recently. Marcus bought a used Prius, says it reminds him that value isn't about price tags. We have dinner every Sunday at Chen's Dumplings, Mr. Chen always giving us too much food and refusing full payment. Phoenix Capital continues to grow, taking on companies that have lost their way and helping them find their purpose again. But my greatest success isn't the money or the power. It's sitting across from my brother each Sunday, seeing him comfortable in his own skin, hearing him laugh without calculation, watching him build something meaningful without compromising who he is. The last time I saw Harper was 3 months ago at a charity gala I couldn't avoid attending. She was there with a new man, someone with the right pedigree and connections, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's cars. She saw me across the room, and for a moment our eyes met. I expected hatred, maybe anger. Instead, I saw something like envy. Not for my money or success, but for something she'd never had and didn't know how to get. Freedom from the cage of other people's expectations. Marcus had worried she'd try to sabotage him, spread rumors, use her connections against us. But she didn't. Maybe because she knew it wouldn't work. Or maybe because some part of her recognized that what we'd torn down needed to be destroyed. Her family's empire built on fraud and favoritism, the toxic culture that demanded people erase themselves to belong. None of it deserved to survive. Richard Whitman was convicted of fraud 6 months after the party. The investigation revealed years of embezzlement, hidden debts, and falsified reports. He's serving 3 years in a minimum security prison. His reputation destroyed, his fortune seized to pay restitution. Margaret sold their Hampton estate and moved to a modest apartment in Connecticut, too ashamed to face New York society. Brad Patterson moved to Seattle, started over as a junior developer at a small firm that didn't Google him before hiring. Last I heard, he was struggling with the same hostile environment he'd once created for others, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless in a toxic workplace. But this story isn't about their downfall. It's about resurrection. Marcus's resurrection from the false identity he'd adopted. My emergence from the shadows where I'd hidden my success. And the resurrection of our relationship, stronger now for having been tested and nearly broken. Every Sunday at Chen's, we talk about the week. Marcus tells me about his startup's progress, the kids they're helping, the difference they're making. I tell him about Phoenix Capital's latest acquisition, always careful not to mention if it's a company where he has friends. We've learned to maintain boundaries while staying close, to be siblings and independent adults simultaneously. Amy joins us sometimes, and she fits perfectly into our dynamic. She teases Marcus about his brief stint as a would-be society man, calls him out when he's being pretentious, grounds him in reality. She reminds me of Mom in the best ways, strong and practical and unwilling to compromise her values for anyone. "You saved me," Marcus told me recently on the anniversary of that engagement party. We were in my actual apartment, not the studio I'd pretended to live in, but the penthouse I'd bought with my first big success. He was helping me cook dinner, something we'd done as kids when Mom was working late. "You saved yourself," I corrected. "You could have chosen Harper even after learning the truth. You could have stayed in that world. You chose to leave. But you gave me the push I needed. You showed me what courage looked like, standing in that room, being mocked and belittled, and not once breaking character until the perfect moment. That took incredible strength." "It took patience," I said, "and the knowledge that their opinions of me didn't matter. They could laugh at my dress, mock my job, dismiss my worth, but none of that changed who I actually was. That's what you'd forgotten, Marcus, that other people's opinions don't determine your value." I'm trying to remember that now. When investors doubt my vision, when people say educational software is a saturated market, when they look at my team and see too many people from humble backgrounds and not enough Ivy League pedigrees. And I remember that night. I remember you standing there letting them think you were nothing while knowing you could buy and sell everyone in that room. I remember that power isn't about showing off. It's about knowing who you are and what you're capable of, regardless of who believes in you. That's the lesson from all of this. Not that money equals revenge or that success is the best comeback. The lesson is that authenticity, staying true to who you are and where you come from, that's the real power. Harper and her family had all the external markers of success, wealth, connections, prestige, but they were hollow inside, so desperate to maintain their facade that they'd forgotten what was real. Marcus and I, we knew what was real. The sacrifice of a single mother working 3 jobs, the protection of an older sister walking her brother to school, the determination of a kid from Queens getting into MIT, the quiet ambition of a woman building an empire while seeming invisible. These real things, these true things, they're what actually matter. I think about the people at that party sometimes, the ones who laughed at my dress and assumed I was nobody. Some of them work for Phoenix Capital now, though they don't know I'm the CA Montgomery who signs their paychecks. They're good at their jobs, and that's what matters. I don't hold grudges. But I remember who showed kindness and who showed cruelty, who had integrity and who had none. The truth is, I could have revealed myself at any time, could have shut down their mockery with a single sentence about my net worth. But that would have been playing their game, accepting their values, agreeing that money determined worth. By letting them reveal their true selves while thinking I was powerless, I learned everything I needed to know about who deserved to remain at Sterling Industries and who needed to go. Marcus asked me once if I regretted how it happened, if I wished I'd told him privately instead of revealing everything so dramatically. I thought about it for a long time before answering. The truth is, Marcus needed that shock. He needed to see Harper and her family's true colors in that moment of revelation. If I'd told him privately, he might have doubted, might have thought I was exaggerating or misunderstanding. But seeing their panic, their desperation, their immediate switch from mockery to fear, that showed him who they really were, better than any private conversation could have. Success isn't about the money in your bank account or the car you drive or the designer clothes you wear. Success is about being able to look at yourself in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. For years, Marcus couldn't do that. He saw a stranger wearing his face someone named Whitman, who'd forgotten Chen ever existed. Now he sees himself again flawed, but authentic, ambitious but grounded, successful on his own terms rather than anyone else's. I still shop at Target sometimes, not because I have to, but because I want to remember that who I am has nothing to do with where I shop. Harper would never understand that. She'd see it as settling for less when you could have more. But it's not about less or more. It's about choosing what matters. What matters is that Marcus and I have each other again. What matters is that Sterling Industries is a better place for the people who work there. What matters is that kids who learn differently will have access to better educational tools because of Marcus's startup. What matters is that Phoenix Capital continues to transform companies from toxic to thriving. The money, the power, the ability to destroy those who hurt us, those are just tools. The real victory was that night at Chen's Dumplings, sitting with my brother over soup dumplings, both of us finally free to be ourselves. No masks, no pretense, no one to impress. Just Marcus and Colleen, Chen's siblings, who'd lost their way, but found it again stronger for having been tested. That's the thing about family, real family. It's not about blood or obligation. It's about choosing each other again and again, even when the world tries to pull you apart. Marcus and I were choosing each other now. Every Sunday dinner, every honest conversation, every moment we spend rebuilding what was nearly destroyed, we're choosing to be family in the truest sense. Harper was wrong when she said I destroyed her family to get my brother back. I didn't destroy anything. I simply revealed what was already broken, already corrupt, already doomed to fail. The truth has a way of doing that, exposing the cracks in foundations built on lies. Her family destroyed themselves the moment they decided their worth came from stepping on others. But Marcus and I, we built ourselves up by lifting each other. That's the difference between real success and the illusion of it. Real success makes everyone around you better. Fake success requires everyone around you to be worse. The Whitmans needed people like me to mock people like Marcus to manipulate to feel powerful. Phoenix Capital needs good people to succeed, companies to thrive, innovation to flourish. One builds, the other destroys. One lasts, the other crumbles the moment someone shines a light on it. As I finish telling you this story, I want you to think about the times you've been underestimated, dismissed, or mocked for not fitting someone else's definition of success. Did it break you or make you stronger? Did it make you want to become like them or more determinedly yourself? Because that's the choice we all face when confronted with people who try to make us feel small. We can either shrink to fit their expectations or stand tall in our own truth. I chose to stand tall even when it looked like I was standing alone. Marcus forgot that for a while, but he remembers now. And if you're watching this feeling like you don't belong, like you're not enough, like success requires you to erase who you are, remember our story. Remember that the girl in the Target dress owned the company. Remember that the brother who lost himself found his way back. Remember that authenticity is the ultimate power, and no amount of money, connections, or prestige can match it. The Whitmans of the world will always exist, always ready to tell you that you're not enough as you are. But you are. You're enough exactly as you are, from exactly where you come from, with exactly the story you carry. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Don't let anyone make you forget who Chen is while you're trying to become Whitman. Because Chen, or whoever you really are, that's where your power lives. That's where it always lived. I just had to wait for the right moment to show it. So I want to ask you, have you ever had a moment where you revealed your true power after being underestimated? Share your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about triumph over adversity, staying true to yourself, and the power of family bonds. Share this video with someone who needs to remember their worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. Thank you for watching. And remember, your authenticity is your superpower. Never let anyone convince you to trade it for their approval.